profile picture that costs
Collectible, yeah.
$500,000.
Hey, you want to buy my profile picture $500,000? I will sell you.
Especially across the region, all right? Not trying to shit on other local Web3 media
when
players.
people say not trying to shit, it is trying to shit.
I guess how I usually start this is that people know me as a media entrepreneur, I guess. Right? So my first preneur was Rice Media.
Firstpreneur. At least you never use virginpreneur, right? Yeah. Okay, anyway, I'll give it to you. Yes.
Yeah, so Rice Media itself, so we've been around for about 5-6 years now. That's our flagship publication. I think I see myself more as a publisher than anything else. And the reason why is because, I mean, at the core, right, we are most interested in unearthing stories that broaden perspectives. For Rice Media, how we started was that back then I was doing something completely different. I was a lawyer. Not that I hated my job, just that I wasn't very good at being a lawyer, I think. So, I mean, just a moment of reflection after 6 years.
Great, that's good. Clarity, yes. I was just one of them. I could never go beyond, right? I'm not great that way.
So, but at the same time, I think back then, the Singapore social media, a lot less mature than it was now. Well, so for example, Rice Media, the only reason why we even carved out a space back then is because there weren't really any publications out there that were a lot more perspective driven, that decided to take a more long-form investigative approach to their stories. So everything originally produced in the sense that instead of trying to cover the news, we were trying to make the news. So that was really like the core intent, but it also is a nightmare difficulty level.
I know. Yes.
Right? I started like a blog back then, basically to kind of just share my own perspectives on things that pissed me off and made me kind of think in Singapore. And because social circles then, or even now in Singapore, quite small, right? So, people started reading it and then you get a bit of attraction. I put in some of my own money to hire an editor. Yeah, and then it took off from there. So I think 6 months later, I decided to quit and then build a team around it. And I haven't looked back since, right? So today, Rice Media, we're active in Singapore and Thailand.
Why Thailand?
Thailand, okay, so I should also share that the aim of Rice Media is to present, an authentic perspectives on Southeast Asia. Right, Southeast Asia and hopefully the rest of Asia eventually. But it's supposed to be a brand that can transcend, cultural boundaries around us.
Okay.
Right, because the thing that really struck me is that when you talk to people from the region, right, Southeast Asia, no one ever says that they're ASEAN. Right, but if you meet someone from say, like France or Italy or something like that, right? They might actually say that, hey, I'm European. Right. So we lack that kind of like
no France, no.
Not
French, not Parisians.
Not Parisians.
Yeah, maybe
true.
Hungarians, Polish.
Yeah, but you know what I mean,
there's
the block where they said, okay, you know what, I'm European, right? Or they might not refer to themselves as European, but like they wouldn't mind kind of like it's kind of normal for people to
maybe they're from Malta or something. Right?
Something like that. Yeah.
Okay.
Right, but then in Southeast Asia, that really isn't the case because it's just you have very distinct kind of cultural differences, even between Singapore and Malaysia. So one of the things with Rice Media was that we really wanted to explore these differences and at the same time find topics and content that could transcend these differences. So to give you an example, social issues, right? Like you talk about say income inequality or like gender roles, right? How we understand it in Singapore versus how someone understands it in Thailand might be completely different. But it is fundamentally the same root topic. What we have in Singapore is that we have the media that kind of delivers their own perspectives on Singapore issues, right? So we only really understand these issues from what we see in Singapore, So I think that the next step here is to have an external reference point so that we can, broaden our perspectives on these issues, right? So seeing how our counterparts kind of like live right outside of Singapore and across the region, right, gives us better insight on how we should approach certain things.
Yeah, fair.
That's something that we are trying to build. So the pipeline for Rice Media really is a regional expansion. Thailand was opened up. We launched it a few months before COVID. There are quite a lot of learnings there because, just being very open about it. Because it's in Thai, right, we had pretty much explosive reach, right? So when something goes viral in Thailand, it's like 100,000 shares,
Yeah. Me gets, yes.
Right, but at the same time, we were essentially building two different publications because I don't speak Thai and I had limited capacity to actually quality control the work.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
So right now, we are embarking on, I would say, phase 1.5 of that regional expansion, right? But we might move away from the local language aspect of things. So we might create content in English first, right? Across, say, Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, Vietnam, and maybe have social media executions in the local languages. But the core content will be created in English. I think fundamentally speaking, creating in the local language is great if you want kind of like maximum engagement, right? But the issue then is that you are essentially creating a local publication. And Rise Media has always kind of aspired to be something a bit broader than that, right? So if we think about, say, a regional consciousness or even like a global audience interested in Southeast Asia, right? That is predominantly an English-speaking audience. We might not reach 100 million kind of like eyeballs, right? In the same way that we would if, let's say, we
wrote in local
language. But I think it's an audience that is more aligned with the brand that we're trying to build. So that's the first thing. Second of all, I think in terms of just a commercial strategy, positioned as a local publication in these countries, right? We're essentially butting heads with all the other local players. Right, and like that is a highly competitive place to be.
Personal question, right? Do you think you guys are like biased as a publication?
I think for sure, So
you come from the camp that everybody is inherently biased?
No, I think I come from the camp that any publication that starts to take sponsored advertising is, your editorial integrity would definitely suffer.
Oh.
So like I don't even like right now I don't even pretend to kind of like say that we have like like a non-biased thing like going. But I think that
wait, so if you don't take sponsors, you're not biased?
You are still biased
in your own optics of how you look at the world, right?
But it's just
how you cover it.
But I think it's just a different way of like kind of like I guess looking at. I mean, how do you define actually bias, right? Obviously, everyone comes to the table with their own kind of like optics, views on things. But I think with sponsored content, it adds a layer of complexity to it because you would also need to tailor your editorial and your content strategy such that it is more commercially viable. Obviously, as a publication, where we most publications who operate under with sponsored content have to how they manage it, right, is that they would have to have like strict editorial guidelines and content guidelines. Hopefully balances being able to deliver enough value to the audience while at the same time delivering enough value to advertisers, right? But if I'm wearing my audience hat, right, as a member of the audience, right, obviously non-sponsored content is the best because there are less agendas at play here. So there's a reason why like when you go on YouTube you kind of like skip the ads. Generally people hate ads. Right? So I mean I'm just being real here, this is just how it is. But at the same time also the relationship with the audience is a very important one. So at the end of the day it's about they understand generally that as an organization, right, we are here to provide as much value as we can in terms of our storytelling to the audience. But on the other hand, there's also creative part of our identity that is very commercial and that keeps the lights on.
Yeah. I mean that's what every publication. Timothy was talking about it also. And to be clear, I think Timothy from Dollars and Cents had an interesting view to say that actually sponsored posts is a very rigorous thing to create relative to editorials, right? So in a sense that editorials, we have our own guidelines, we do the things, we write it up, we record, and life goes on. But when you work with sponsors, depending on who you work with, certain sponsors, they try very hard to tailor how you say it. But other sponsors, they try to like bring you in within certain accuracy of the content and all that. Any thoughts on that?
I think both are equally as rigorous, in my opinion. It's just that obviously with the sponsored content that actually works out the best would be content that also kind of reaches the audience, right? So like it would need to be content that they would also appreciate despite the fact that it's sponsored. So that's obviously the ideal. When you have a brand partner that understands this and understands how you communicate with your audience and then leverages on that to kind of sell the advertising, right? That's the ideal. But in my experience, the ideal is there's a reason why it's the ideal. And this is not me kind of like shitting on different business models or like saying that like publications should not take sponsored advertising or should take more sponsored advertising. I'm not making a value judgment.
I'm not being.
It's just I think that for independent publications, right, it is something that a lot of them have to kind of grapple with. With more specific beats and verticals, so like such as finance, personal finance, right? There is an opportunity, I think, to cultivate a subscription-based program. More so than general news.
When was the last time you wrote? Because all editors, you start writing, right? Eventually, you get to a point where you stop writing.
So about 2 years ago, man.
Okay.
In fact, like I actually have stuff that I've written, but it's on my computer, and then I write halfway, and then I stop. Right. So one of the things that I have been meaning to do next year is to get back into it again. But so I want to try and see it through this time, because I've been making promises to people that about this for some time already.
Yeah. So if someone wants to start something, in the writing, building a side hustle, maybe building a media company.
I think it's right now it has never been easier to have a platform and monetize. There's Ghost, Substack, quite a few options for you to kind of explore. At the same time, I would also say that because everybody can write. If you think about it, everybody can write.
I cannot. But
right?
I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying.
Right?
Yes.
But at the same time, like it is being able to attract an audience with your writing, right, it's quite a rare skill set. Yeah. My view is that like don't start this with the intent of it being a side hustle. Yeah. Especially if let's say it's your first go at it, right? And like you're just trying to create interesting content. So start there. Definitely have an idea of aside from the obvious stuff, right? So like, figuring out the topic and the theme, the vertical, etc. That's obvious, right? I think that one of the most immediate things you can try to do, right, is to find a way to kind of capture your 20 closest friends, right, network. So if you get the buy-in of the people, of say like a small group of people, right, then that ultimately snowballs. So don't cast the net too wide. Try to get 100,000 kind of readers from the get-go, right? If it's about say finance, think about say people close to you who have an interest in personal finance and what they potentially would want to consume, and try and reach them first.
I think a lot of people that are not in the media business, they don't understand that your immediate audience may not be the people that are paying the bills. Right? So as much as you want to gather a particular audience, you also need to know who is going to pay for the bills, right? Like which sponsors are you talking to? What is your model? How is it going to happen? And then with that, then you cultivate an audience, because that's kind of how I take my approach now, because I'm fully commercial, right, at this point in time. So it's not, okay, I mean, I'm not say fully commercial like Matcha, I don't like doing what I do, right? It's fun, but I do come from a very commercial viewpoint. So I'll think like, okay, so if I want to talk to this particular group of sponsors, who are they trying to talk to? And then from there, I work backwards on like, how am I going to create content to gather these people, right? So it's I would say a more sophisticated, level of building a media company. But so you think for a newbie, you don't need to care about these things?
I think that like that is because you're at a point where the business is slightly more mature already. So you have to kind of have a strategy for this, right? So when you want to roll out new products, you would be thinking of sponsors in mind already. But from conception, right, or rather what I believe, because for most media companies, we don't really have like a sophisticated kind of tech stack, unless you're building like media tech or something, right? What we really have is brand equity. So all the value actually gets tied into the Financial Coconut brand. Like that's where the value is. I would start off with trying to create a valuable brand first. From then on, whether it becomes a business is a separate conversation.
Okay, fair.
Yeah.
I get it. And even I mean, I've met many people that start their own podcast. It didn't monetize because podcast monetization is horrible, very difficult to do, but they end up joining bigger organizations, right? Because the organization, you could do this, and you pick it up. Maybe you could write, you could do some things, and then you come together and you get a decent paying job, right? So there are many of all these other things. Will up to you lah. Or personal advice: don't do podcasts. But see what Mark says. Okay, about writing.
I mean, I'm not. I have been doing this, but I'm no means like I don't have the holy grail. Like, it's not like I said with Rice Media. Honestly, we were very lucky in the sense that at that point in time, I think the culture here, or the audience in Singapore at least, there was a gap or space for a publication like ours.
Like a leftist.
We're not a leftist publication. I wouldn't kind of.
Don't corner yourself inside. Yeah.
I mean, I'm just gonna put it out there, but we definitely don't have like a central ideology that's running our editorial.
Okay.
Right. So this probably goes back to your question on bias, right? Obviously, the team and the people that Rice Media attracts tend to lean a certain way, but when we execute the content, we're not advocates. Okay, so we're not here to.
So you're not an activist, right? You're just here to cover what the activists are.
We're here to present. We're here to present perspectives or stories deserve attention, right? But might not receive mainstream attention or like mainstream endorsement, right? So in presenting these alternative areas, right, very often they would lean a certain way, right? But we do it with the intent of bringing more things to the table. So when the audience, they look at certain issues or situations in the news, they are able to make better decisions for themselves.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and I think a lot of the articles went viral. It has definitely shaped a lot of the broader perspective. But that's
I hope so. I mean, I would like to think so.
Definitely have like not what we'll do until now, right? Come on, right? So there's a lot of that, right? And recently, you guys have come up with a new publication, right? Specifically, you are leading the new publication, and that's why you're on the show today, right? So what is this new publication? What are you guys trying to do here? Why enter the space? Maybe you can even talk about the intermediary that you guys try to do, like traditional finance stuff and all that.
Sure. I mean, I can give a bit of a lowdown. So the new publication we launched is called Blockhead. Blockhead.co.
Okay. Blockhead.co.
Right.
Yes.
The idea here is really that Rice Media as a group, right, is sharp, focused editorial content, right? Producing journalism to as best of a... I'm not going to sit here and say that, we produce world-class journalism, okay, because we're not there yet. Okay, so like that's something that, ultimately we aspire to do. We're constrained by resources for sure, but like, we like to say that, most of our products are driven by a journalistic intent, right? Whether we fulfill the execution...
That's for you to judge. That's for you to judge. Right?
I guess maybe sometimes we do, sometimes we don't, but it is an aspiration. So where Blockhead is concerned, right? Personally, I've always been interested in the Web3 space. Not always. Okay, do you know how people kind of introduce themselves when, when you ask them about, are you in crypto? Or do you like Web3 or are you in the Web3 space? So the first thing they tell you is that, oh yeah, I started investing in 2017 or 2016, right? So these are very, very important details because this is like how many bear markets you've been through and and when you started investing in it, kind of it's a way to show you that I've been around the block. Right? Yeah. For me, obviously, I have been investing in crypto, but it was mainly out of curiosity than anything else. What kind of drew me to this space is I think that where Web3 is concerned, there is a serious credibility issue, especially across the region. All right, not trying to shit on other local Web3 media players. When
people say not trying to shit, it is trying to shit.
It's that like a lot of the media that I see coming out of the region, right? They are, or at least in the past 1 or 2 years during the bull run, right? Essentially, we're just shitting products,
cheerleader lah.
Right? There's a lot of cheerleaders, and the conversation on Twitter, it's very polarized as usual because it's Twitter, right? So you're either some sort of like crypto maxi, right? Or you're not. And so that made me think about how applying some journalistic rigor to what the space is doing, especially in the region, is needed. Because there are a lot of things really happening in our backyard. A lot of projects, great projects being incubated, but also a lot of scams.
Is it a lot more scams than great projects?
No, I wouldn't say that. Okay. I wouldn't say that. Okay. But I think that it's a lot more like where people are trying to piece together the whole regulatory framework, right? And how regulators are trying to catch up with innovation. I think it's one of the bigger themes going forward. I think that particular piece, it needs some objectivity to kind of...
So it needs a mark.
Uncover. Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm like...
It needs a mark, right?
Because the I mean, if you just look at some of the recent debates online, it's very like people are trying to find a middle ground here. I think that like in terms of how we see the Web3 industry moving forward in the region, right? There's a lot to be excited about. There are a lot of like great projects being incubated now across Southeast Asia, in fact across Asia, right? But Southeast Asia in particular doesn't receive as much coverage as it should.
So what is something that's interesting that you've covered recently?
To be very honest,
cannot shield, we're not shielding.
I'm not shilling, but like the content cycle recently really has the main theme here has been about a lot of like bad news. Okay, so I can't sit here and say that there's anything really optimistic that we've kind of like So for example, there are the big names are dominating the headlines. So you have Circle, a company that essentially issues USDC. They just received in principle approval from MES.
Nice.
Right, so it's a big deal.
Big deal.
Right. So things like that, have made the news recently, right? But I think in our part of the world, a lot of the chatter recently has been on regulation, right? And then the competition between countries here to attract talent, Hong Kong versus Singapore, Singapore versus Dubai, as kind of fintech or crypto hubs, Singapore versus Japan as a fintech hub as well. Yeah. So that's the broader macro conversation. Yeah.
Okay. So what is your base take then on regulation?
My base take.
More regulation in the crypto space.
think generally speaking, my personal take is that I buy into the idealistic part of me is that I totally buy into the whole decentralized future kind of vision.
Really?
I do.
Okay.
Right?
Tell me more.
And I think that the whole point of actually even looking, I mean, if you're even considering DeFi as a viable space, right?
Viable space, you mean like use it as a utility or?
No, I think that like the core ideology here is we should ideally be in a position where normal people are able to kind of store and transfer their wealth, right, without the permission of a third-party intermediary. That is ideal.
So that's
right?
your baseline.
That's the baseline.
Process. Okay.
So like, I mean, if it's marketing, I'm sold on marketing. Right? But at the same time also, I think that should be steps taken. I don't want to use the word protect people because like that's like really like kind of like patronizing. Like at the end of the day, you make your own decisions, right? I do think it's important for kind of like regulators to step in certain areas, especially like the mess that you've seen this year with all the stable coins.
Yeah.
Long-term view here is this: regulation always needs to be playing catch up with innovation. So that's the other view here.
First principles, huh?
Right.
No,
So you can't have regulators
be ahead.
Ahead of innovation.
How does it look like being ahead?
Okay, I don't really have a good example of this, to be very honest with you, right? But like like the reason why I'm even talking about this is because sometimes there's this public view that like shit happens, then regulators kind of step in with a knee-jerk reaction, and then they either over-regulate or they maybe they take a balanced approach, right? And then some people might be thinking, oh yeah, like shouldn't they have done anything earlier or sooner, right? Instead of waiting for the mess to happen and then they regulate. But I think that this is just how it has to be, right? Because if you do it, if they over-regulate, right, and that's when you kind of curtail, you kind of like curtail or kind of hamstring kind of innovation, right? So unfortunately, I think that we need to kind of go through like pain, right? And then regulation has to come in. And then we just have to keep going through these cycles until we reach a certain point.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what are some interesting new regulations that you've observed? Yes.
Okay, so I mean, like you have like obviously MAS coming in with their they've just released a couple of consultation papers. Okay, one of them purports to, or rather, what they're looking at is to add more friction between your digital kind of payment and token service providers and like your retail consumers. Right, so I think by friction here, this could come in the way of like a knowledge test, right? Which has been,
It's like when I want to open a stock account and then they'll ask me to take a quiz and then like screenshot my results and send it back to them, something like that.
I mean, it's one of those very neutral things, knowledge test, okay, right? Like, what's the harm, right? And then like the one that's a bit more controversial here is like like adding a certain kind of net worth perimeter.
High net worth kind of thing,
right? And I think the real conversation here would then be also certain service providers should follow the OFAC kind of sanction list. Yeah, they control. It's like essentially part of the U.S. Treasuries, and then they kind of control like different areas of the world with like that are sanctioned against doing business with the U.S. So like like sanction entire countries like Iran. So if you're Iranian, you can't do business with American, vice versa, right? Yeah. So there's that as well. I think that
really people are talking about that.
People are talking about that, but I think that the MAS portion doesn't extend to that yet.
With that. Okay.
Yet, right? But that's always has always been a big criticism about crypto, right?
Yeah, and then how is that decentralized, right? In that sense?
Exactly. I would say one of the perspectives here is this. So if you put in, have a certain net worth criteria for retail investors, right, to start investing or buying in kind of like crypto products or derivatives, right? They're gonna trade anyway. Right? So this was one of the things I was talking about, right? And then you have there's this wild west of like decentralized exchanges, right? Borderless payment providers.
Yes.
Right? And it's great, and a lot of them are already being used in Singapore.
Not your wallet, not your token.
Right. So if the regulated centralized exchanges, right, have a certain high bar criteria for the quote unquote normal folk, to trade on them or invest through them, right? Then these people are going to be kind of channeled to the alternatives, in which case you might actually encourage a different problem. It'd be interesting to see how that develops, right? And then also kind of looking at like the net worth criteria, right? One of the other questions that has come up is whether that should also include crypto assets in your wallet or in your portfolio, right? Because what I do know is that a lot of the crypto investors out there, most of their net worth is tied to the few $1 million of like like ETH or like Bitcoin that they might have, and they're not exactly cash rich it's not kind of like real estate that counts as like part of the $1 million kind of net worth that you need.
No, but these days you can mortgage those crypto, right? Get a loan on them.
You can. But I think that for the regulatory purposes, whether it counts towards like that cap, right, is an open question. Because if it doesn't, then that will mean that a large portion of like the community that invests in crypto now probably can't meet those requirements. And they will definitely be going to like the alternatives.
But I'm pretty sure they will. I mean, it's all about the tax, right? It's all about trying to regulate and tax. And if this thing gets regulated, it gets structured, and then there'll be all these tax mechanisms, right? Okay, cool.
So then going back to your other question about doesn't this kind of isn't this very centralized, right? Yeah, totally. So like this is where like the debate is at the moment. So like I don't know whether you guys caught the SBF, Sam Bankman-Fried, and Eric Verhees.
No.
So they have the FTX founder and then like the Shapeshift founder. I mean, these two guys are the crypto titans at the moment. Okay, so like the big shits.
Big shits, yes. So what are they talking about?
Right. So essentially, they had a debate on bankless, and then they were talking about. So they both fundamentally agree on what the vision for DeFi is supposed to look like. Yeah, pretty much that's what I mentioned earlier in this podcast or this interview, that baseline level is that it needs to be permissionless, and it needs a permissionless system where like people are able to kind of like transfer and store their wealth, right? So they agree on that. But I think where SBF, the FTX founder, or what he has said is that like he believes that most the crypto service providers, right, or DeFi protocols, they would need to kind of comply with the OFAC sanction rules, which means that this large country, like essentially this kind of blocks off entire populations from actually kind of like trading on certain platforms, and then obviously that received kind of like pretty vehement pushback from Eric on the other side. I think that what is actually missing in this entire thing here, right, is that if you look
China.
China is one
whether
thing.
China wants to participate in this discussion.
I mean, this is just kind of a cynical view as well. I mean, if you've been following the news with FTX, and like what SBF has been, what they've been doing, right, after the whole stablecoin crisis and then the market turbulence, right. They've been essentially engaging in a lot of like vulture capitalism. I mean, good for them. They've been buying up a ton of
sucking it up, yes.
A ton of companies. So like right now, I think that you're gonna have like like SBF's kind of crypto empire, right? And once you are at that point, obviously you want regulation, but obviously you want kind of like centralization.
Of course. So you're incentivized to do that, right? Because you're already the giant in the space.
Exactly.
You add regulation, you make it harder for people to participate.
Exactly. So and I think that's something that hasn't actually been pointed out in. This is what's missing in this whole thing, because you have these personalities. Crypto is still very personality driven, right? So like those two had their debate. Then like the Vitalik, the Ethereum founder, came in to kind of chime in on his own, like saying that I think he suggested having like leverage caps or something like that. I'm just thinking here that like because essentially these three personalities would have their fan bases, and then like it's just it's a spectacle. Right, but if you peel all that back, right, and one reason why you have like the founder of FTX kind of calling for regulation, right, is that dude, like you guys are gonna dominate space.
I get it.
Right,
it's the same as
so like if every DeFi protocol or so the one thing that has been quite clear also though is that his point is that this doesn't stop innovation at the protocol layer. Developers who want to build on chains, right, they're still free to do so. But what it would prevent is that they would prevent your end users from actually interacting or like using these protocols or these services,
which will then change a lot of the underlying incentives to develop certain things. Yes.
But they see it as a compromise because the thing that is not tenable to them is if even at the development layer that is regulated, so they don't want any regulation on the development. But then like in terms of how the end users actually kind of interact with these service providers, right? That should be regulated. So this goes back to what MAS is doing. They're trying to do that as well.
Okay. So then are there any other like major crypto developments, like maybe like gaming or whatever that you think it's interesting that our listeners should like think a little bit about? Because this whole game NFT thing is like is like making the rounds.
I have a view on games and NFTs though.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you were to ask me, have I seen any good gaming projects recently that have gone like, wow, this is really great? No. Okay, I have over the past 1 or 2 years. I think that there are projects that people already know about that have received a lot of attention, right? So you have that move to earn thing, Steppen, which is pretty interesting to me because I run. There is that P2E, like play to earn, with XC Infinity and I think a couple of others. I have certain views on this. Okay, so I want to share my own biased views first.
Yeah, share your views. No, because recently I have quite a few discussions on this, and I was like, oh, that was interesting views.
So I mean, I think that once there is a monetization aspect in games, right? The monetization aspect is always going to become central, and that will always be more important than the entertainment value. It's just because it's just how it is, human nature. I don't think that you can actually innovate around it.
So you feel like all these secondary markets of how games work, they need to stay in the secondary markets. And the developers of the games should focus on the game.
But I am coming from a very elitist kind of gamer point of view, right? Because I've been playing games like pretty much my whole life.
The W kind of people.
I'm reading from World of Warcraft to like kind of like like all that lah. Me gets. Yes, right?
It's
but
very elite. We're on a different camp.
So I believe that games should just be games and just don't Diablo once had they want to do kind of an auction house there, which was just online auction house, right? I mean, just
because they want to integrate the secondary market, right? All these like black market things outside, they want to bring it in.
And in a way, like the argument here is that when I was playing WoW or World of Warcraft, I was already kind of like paying these Chinese farmers to kind of farm.
Not literally, like
no, literally, like you these Chinese these sweatshops in China set up such that they would farm gold for you. You give them your account number, they will farm gold for you, right?
Wow.
While you're sleeping, right? And then you pay them a certain amount, right? So there was already that secondary economy there. But then I've always felt is that let it remain a secondary economy. Don't integrate it into the game. You know what I mean? Like, because that completely kind of like spoils like what I feel should be, just the entertainment value of it. But having said that, I recognize that this is just one perspective because, what you define as a game, that definition is flexible as well. So maybe a good video game should be a computer game should be something that allows me to make money. And maybe I enjoyed it more than actually like the story or like kind of like... So I mean, like I do think that there is another perspective here, but I feel like we should be honest about that conversation. Right? We shouldn't come in and say that, P2E game developers, right? Like they were creating kind of like, like the next frontier in games, right? It isn't, what we are really doing here is that we are essentially looking to reposition or rebrand what people think.
And to be clear, there are a lot of influencers out there shielding these kind of stuff, right? So which is why it's like, really? Yep. I think for a lot of you tuning in, you need to realize that building a great game, right? It takes like billions of dollars, right? To build a great game, right? It's not a few million kind of thing can happen, right? And so do you really want to participate in those things? I'm not too sure. It's up to you to decide.
But having said that, so this I'm going to answer your question on like what projects and like areas of that I'm excited about, right? So having said that, I think that obviously that there's a tremendous potential for innovation here. I think that one of the things to look at really is on a more like infrastructure layer, right? I mean, I'm sure like this already should be common knowledge by now, but for those who are tuning in and are just looking at NFTs as a a profile picture that costs
collectible,
$500,000.
Quite collectible, yes.
Right. So that definitely.
Hey, you want to buy my profile picture $500,000? I will sell you.
Right, so that definitely is one, I would say, very public use case for it. But if you peel that back, what it actually represents is essentially a new way for us to capture ownership, right, of digital assets, right?
Or even physical assets.
Or even physical
actually,
assets.
Before NFT became a JPEG, right, it started as a structure to kind of own things that are, essentially like fractional ownership of property. I think that was one of the first main use cases. And then now turn one round, the NFT guys kind of tell me, you can actually use this for fractional. So I'm like, bro, this was like way before it became a JPEG file.
So the fractional ownership of like tokenization and fractional ownership, I think it's really exciting. But I think that where it becomes really interesting for people in our space, but also anybody in the business of like verifying sources of information. There's a lot of utility there, So give you an example, right? As journalists, sometimes
I would not say I'm a journalist, but yes, as journalists,
or rather, like if you think about
a very high bar to meet, just say
not as journalists, but okay. But anyway, like let's just say if you need to kind of KYC anything, right? All of that is currently all the process right now is fairly manual, and then like it still requires some sort of third-party verification, which is great. I think it has to be the case. But on a very base layer, right, being able to kind of verify the provenance or the source of something, right, on chain, right, I think it's going to be a game breaker on that front. And it's just not a very sexy thing to kind of talk about because it's not like
it's like building the roads. It's not sexy. Everybody will look at the cars.
But even for our space, right, think about a day where let's just say we have a whistleblower, right? And want to send us kind of like documents, they want to send us shit or like about some company or whatever, right? We have to kind of like encrypt these documents, maybe set up a Proton mail, or something like that, or transmit it over email, which is really unsecure as well. Blockchain actually is a very elegant solution to all that. I'm just giving people an idea out there, so whoever wants to build this, right, like just let me know.
And you can drop all the information to his wallet. It's like, hey, there's this thing. So
right.
Okay.
I've always felt that something like Wikipedia should actually be a DAO.
Yeah,
so
then people can vote for the accuracy of the information.
Exactly.
Right? Okay,
So that's actually where I think a lot of the innovation could be quite exciting, right? Because
which are not retail focused, not sexy.
You could peer review things online. You could kind of verify the provenance or the source of the information.
I can review all the food reviews.
You can,
this one not accurate one. This
exactly.
one rubbish. This 5-star fail.
Exactly.
Yes,
right.
yes.
And then because it's on chain, it's there forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. So. Yeah.
Okay.
Right. So
fair.
then there is that also that. The legal framework around it could also be very interesting and see to see how that develops, right? So all of this actually stems from the NFT. So to tie it back, right? All of this actually comes back to the NFTs, right? So that's why it's exciting to me. I think that in Singapore for sure we've definitely met or encountered. In fact, not just in Singapore, man. Singapore and Malaysia, Thailand, seen a lot of really interesting NFT projects, right? And they've all done very well, right? But I think that. And in different ways, shapes, and forms, right? So most of them are just obviously community driven. So if they already have a strong community that they can kind of mobilize and then sell a narrative in a very coherent, articulate fashion.
Sell a narrative,
right? Then you will get that buy-in, and then you would be able to kind of I don't want to say make money, but at the same time you'd be able to raise enough money,
raise capital, and see how you're gonna run.
Right, but I think that based off of that particular those particular use cases, right, I think that the stuff that we can be excited about is going to happen more on the back end.
And we're gonna cover more of this on our show, right? So we are building a show together with the team at Blockhead. And what would be the show's name?
It's gonna be called Blockcast.
Yes, and it will come. We'll be plugging our own show on our own show, right? Yes. Anyway, yes. So we're gonna do a new podcast called Blockcast together with Blockhead team, and it will air every Friday on the TFC main feed and of course on our Investor Network feed. So that'll be gonna be really really awesome.
Yeah. I will definitely have more
things to say.
More sexy projects to show.
More specific things to show, But today we do the broad ideas, right? Yeah. Fair. In closing, is there any other thing about the crypto space that you want to talk a little bit about, or anything how you, maybe something along the lines of with all these development, how is someone redefining their finances, from a personal level?
Okay, I'm sure there's already this caveat that goes out on the Financial Coconut podcast, right? I've seen it, right?
It's not for...
it's not financial advice. So, obviously, I think that from a financial standpoint, I do believe that cryptocurrencies, in one way, shape, or form, have a place in a personal finance portfolio. I think they do. As to what percentage of this... I think that is obviously a question of your risk tolerance. Yeah. I think that where you see, so what I feel is relevant, and this is just how I like to approach things right now also, because understanding the macro environment, and this includes the regulatory environment around, digital assets, right? Like what we just talked about earlier, is actually very relevant for retail investors or people like us, because how I even got into kind of investing in digital assets like this, right? It's because my friends were like, oh, dude, this is either a 0 or 100 thing. Just put 1% of your stuff in there, even if it tanks, doesn't matter, right? Yeah, but if let's say you have everybody thinking like that, right? This is how the problem starts. Right? So I think it helps to understand from a macro level. So not just about what's happening with the Fed and interest rates and all this. Obviously, that really dictates, most of the investment decisions right now, right? But if you take a longer term view to this, right, the regulatory environment, and then also understanding what the projects are doing in certain parts, in certain sectors of the industry, right, will give you a better view of how it's going in 3 to 5 years.
I get it. Yeah. That's why I'm very interested in talking about the petrol yuan, some of these other things, which are all very, very big development in all facets of finance at this point in time. Right?
So if I think that despite what happened this year with Luna, right, Terra Luna, stable coins, right? So I think that's actually really the ideal vision, being able to have a digital currency that can really act as a medium of exchange. You know, so that's going to open up a lot of things, and I think that how governments decide to come in and embrace that, right, with their CBDCs, whether it's pegged to other currencies or not, right, that is going to be, you know, an exciting development.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
people view it as, oh, this is just another form of centralization, which it is.
It is.
Right.
It
But
is.
I think that can go hand in hand with innovation in certain areas. Yeah. Right. So like, you know, if Singapore, right, MES is coming up with their, I mean, I'm not an MES fanboy by any means, so, you know, right.
Unless you want to sponsor,
yeah,
right?
but so what I think is interesting is that they're trying out their retail, I think it's Project Orchid or something like that. They're trying out their own like retail version of
it has to be
CBDC.
Orchid. It has to be Orchid.
Yeah. Right. So I think Grab, Temasek, all are partners. But I think interesting, you know, because right now if that actually comes to fruition, then you would have a lot less friction when you use like PayLah, PayNow, or like GrabPay, etc., etc.
Yeah.
Right. The on-ramp, off-ramps will be a lot easier, right? And the consumers would actually, we would actually feel the impact in a positive way.
Yeah.
I mean, So I think that is some areas which are interesting in terms of the challenge here, I think, from a media company point of view, or generally, you know, even as an investor in this space, right, is how do you get yourself excited about the innovation versus the
hype,
the market action, or like, you know, like right? Because 99% or 90% of the interest right now from an audience point of view, right, is how can I make 100x in the next couple of months, right? Using this, right, and we can't avoid that. So that is generally a big theme. So when we talk about, say, Web3 or cryptocurrencies, that kind of hangs over everything else. So one of our challenges as a media company is Blockhead, right, is to get people excited about innovation.
Okay, and we'll talk more about that, right?
Yeah.
Every Friday. Check out our other shows. Okay, first question, right? So we have a 3 rapid fire question. The first question is, what is your best and worst investment so far?
Well, I guess worst investment is easily the China stocks I bought. If you're talking from a finance point of view, for sure. I would even actually put that. I would rank that lower than my cryptocurrency investments. Okay, so I got into Baba and all that, maybe
At the high of 300.
slightly under that, but
280.
Not,
Okay.
Right, and then I just want to smash my computer sometimes. So,
It's okay. Me gets.
I don't have a lot, so like I don't have a huge holdings in that, but like I would say that
Annoying. It's annoying.
not really kind of understanding, you know, just the political risks surrounding it, right? And just being gung ho about it. Best investment so far. You know, I mean, obviously from an investment point of view, so like, you know, I don't trade, and I have like certain holdings that I kind of like just continue to hold.
Yeah.
Right. So that their stocks. I would say that actually ever since my kid was born, it's just dedicating a certain amount of time investment into that.
So your kid is your best investment.
No. I wouldn't. Yeah, I wouldn't call him an investment, or see, but
Please
like,
don't. Yes, please don't.
But it's more about.
Yeah, say something to your kid.
No,
Daddy,
I would say that.
Hey, you know, that kind of thing.
No. I would say that actually dedicating, like, investing time, right, for certain, I would say, aspects of like family time, right. It's a really solid investment, in my opinion.
I get
right?
it. I get it.
Because that's just the way I look at it. I think it's something you can't get back.
Next question is, what is something that's $100 that has been a game changer for your life? It can be anything. You know, for me, right, it was like an electric toothbrush.
Actually, electric toothbrush as well. That was something that I bought recently.
Feels damn good, right?
It's good. Yeah.
Feels like I can delay the dentist for another half a year. Yeah. What is a place you learn from that you think it's underrated?
A place that I learned from.
Yeah, it can be a book, can be a podcast, can be a YouTube channel, can be an editorial, anything. A place that you learn from that you feel is underrated and our listeners need to know.
That Blockhead's managing editor, a co-founder, shared with me, called Blackbird Spy Plane.
Blackbird Spy Plane.
Okay, so it is actually a global dossier, or like kind of like a global culture and style report. Not that I really give a shit about style or fashion or like, you know, trends or whatever.
You don't need to say that.
I don't. But I don't. Just you know, yeah. But I'm trying to sell the newsletter here.
Okay.
So like, you know, for someone like me, like, you know, like this, I'm really not their target audience. I'm not, right? But then they have such a distinct style, right, of reporting, right? It made me subscribe to it.
Really?
Yeah. So I paid $60 a year for this. Okay.
Wow. Okay.
So you guys check it out, because like I think it's just not just the the writing style is very unique, and then the way that they present the images and like the collages is very unique as well. But also what they cover is very interesting. So I think that they've got some big name celebrities on there, Lifestyle reporting, right? So like, like from Monocle and like I would say all the way down to, your different kind of like F&B, fashion media, etc., right? Very boring already,
You think very cha-cha already, lah.
No, yeah, it's just it is what it is, like, like you kind of like, like it's not. I mean, they have a place in they play an important role, but it's been a long time since I've seen something in this particular beat, right, that really stands out.
Okay.
So they really stand out, right? But
okay.
Yeah,
Blackbird Spy Plane.
Yeah.
Right? That's a
and I know it sounds really indie or whatever, but like they've got 100,000 paying subscribers.
Bro, you are indie, that's where you start. So okay, thank you, Mark.
Okay.
Love it. See you. Bye, guys.